We got Darin Wall here. For those of you that don't know, here's a little bit of a synopsis I was given before we got everything set up. So he was in a Vancouver band called 88 Mile, then moved to Seattle, joined a band called Skeletor for a bit, and then is now in the band Greyhawk. For those of you that may not know, we're definitely going to get into this at some point. I know he saved some people from a shooter in Boise, Idaho. I believe that was a few years back, and is also one of, I believe, only 3 people to play on Dave Grohl's throne, which um, that's quite the feat, I must say. So without further ado, everyone, give a big round of applause to our guest, Darin Wall of Greyhawk. Darin, thank you for joining us. Oh, 1 second. I have to unmute you. There we go. Go again.
Okay. No, hey, man, thanks for having me on. And what's up, everybody who's checking this out?
I know the stuff at the end I do want to get into, but because that's obviously that's really recent, and obviously that's before we even dive into anything. I want to say huge kudos to you for just taking action in that moment. Back in Boise, before we even start, I want to say that's wow. I remember when Devin told me that, I was like, I remember reading about that and just thinking the balls on that person to just take action and try to create some safety in a situation. So I don't want to just browse over that. I do want to get to it during this, but I just wanted to say that at the start because I think that's something that you're going to be remembered for quite a while, my friend, just because that's a very respectful thing to I think to just do, to put yourself in that, I guess, line of danger just to be a protective force.
Well,
for
thanks,
lack
man.
of a better term. I want to start off because I know you're based in Seattle, but when Devin told me you started off in Vancouver and played in this band called 88 Mile, I was very curious because this obviously shows you've been at this for quite a long time. And I think in the age we're in now, we have a lot of musicians who have been at this for multiple years. We have everyone who's starting out and getting inspired and getting out, starting bands. And then we have all the guys that are a decade in or 2 decades in and maybe still figuring out what they're doing. And I think what's cool about just knowing this little bit about you is everyone has some sort of journey. And I'm curious, how did yours really start?
Man, so I was actually I've been in a lot of bands over the years, dude. I started doing this in 2005, I want to say. I started my first band was in Vancouver as well. It was a thrash metal band. We were called Entropia, and that band was probably around for a good solid 8-9 years. And we did some cool stuff. We played with some big name bands. We did a couple of tours. We put out 3 records, and then after that, I kind of got burnt out on playing 1,000 miles an hour all the time, and I wanted to do a little more rock and roll stuff, I guess. So I started 88 Mile Trip, which was just 88 Mile Trip was just a really cool stoner rock, Caius, Fu Manchu kind of vibe to it. It was very fuzzy because I love that stuff.
Almost a complete 180 from the thrash stuff. Going from one end of the spectrum to the other almost.
Yeah, a million notes at a million miles per hour to a few notes, quite slow. And from there, 88 Mile Trip we were on from 2012 until probably 2017. And that was when I moved to the United States. We kind of kept it going for a while, but we hadn't really mastered the technology and the cross-border distance thing. We were still very much hung up on rehearsing together all the time and whatnot. So, but that was kind of how I started. And it's been and then like you said, I joined Skeletor, and I was in Skeletor from 2016 until I want to say the pandemic was when we decided to part ways because my focus had shifted to Greyhawk, and that's what I'm doing now. But I've been doing it a long time, but I tell you, it's a learning process, and I think the key to longevity doing this is one, you got to just do it because you love it, because there's not a lot of money in independent heavy
Oh,
music. And you got to realize that from the get go. Some people can do it. Some people can make some money, but there's generally not a lot. But it's also a matter of growth and always trying to learn and always trying to progress, and not just with your music, but in how you do things, how you book shows. I mean, if I could go back in time and give 25-year-old me some advice, like wow, it would have been a different path I walked, but no regrets.
you touched on a lot of really good things in there too, like the growth and the journey and everything. And there's one thing that I think corresponds to that is if you are someone who truly does want to find a way to quote unquote make money, or the way I personally like to look at it is learn to live off my passion. I find that's the best way about it. Is it's not shooting for mass wealth, it's just being able to find ways to constantly do what I love doing. That's through learning and growing and maybe finding the other things within music that you can lean into, whether that's being a teacher, like a music
Hmm.
instructor, or if you're like really good at graphic design and you turn out like end up doing all that for your band, maybe leaning into that a bit more and seeing if other people need those services.
Yep.
I'm curious for you, like how have you noticed your growth and I guess your strengths, and what strengths did you notice you had to lean into as you went through this journey? Because as you said, like you went from a thrash band to a stoner rock band to a pretty serious band by the sounds of it,
Yeah.
to then having that go quits to, or not call quits, but to you then shifting your priorities
Hmm.
to focus on another more serious band. I'm curious what, I guess, what is that conversation you would have with 25-year-old you, for lack of a better term, well, keeping things out if you need to keep them out, obviously.
My advice to the younger me would be you can't do it by yourself. Um, you need people around you who know what you're doing. You need to ask questions from people who are doing the things you want to do. You need to look at bands who have success and say, what are they doing and how are they doing that? And then see how you can take what they're doing and how you can apply it to your own path. And once I started doing that, when I grew up and realized I don't know everything, you know, this isn't the 1980s or 90s. Like no A&R person is going to come down to the club and see you play. Um, I started looking around at my peers who were doing things really well and just asking them, and usually they're really well open. I got great advice. Now that Greyhawk is doing our thing and we're signed and doing playing overseas and whatnot, which is always kind of what I wanted to do. I actually did a brief stint in a band out of Vancouver called Unleash the Archers.
They
They're
are
they're,
amazing.
they're kind of a big deal. So I played bass for them very briefly, and in that time I kind of really picked all of their brains and kind of asked them for advice on what they do, and just watching other peers of mine have success and go, oh, that's how you do that. Oh, and if you ask people, they'll tell you because it's not like your success is going to hamper theirs, right? So
No, rising tides raise all ships.
certainly. So I mean that was basically the big thing I would tell younger me is you don't know everything and you can't do it by yourself and no one's going to come along and think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. So, find some people who are doing it really well and ask them for help.
That's awesome. Sir Integra here chimed in saying, just good advice, dude. I get by with a little help from my friends, which is
Absolutely.
100% true. Something that you brought into that is a term that I've heard thrown around. I'm hearing it more now, and I feel like I heard it when I was younger and I just brushed it off, but be a sponge. When you go
Yeah.
into scenarios, like really be there to learn. I do a lot of like roadie stuff for larger shows that come to town once in a while. So I do like unloading the truck, setting up the shit, getting thrown on like audio or video, maybe running spotlights. But that time I'm there, I'm not just working, but I'm really observing because for me as a musician, a stage like that, playing on it even once, that's a nice goal. But understanding what it takes to bring that all together, it
Sure.
puts a whole lot of stuff into perspective of being like, wow. So for something like this to happen for myself or any of my friends' bands, they need to be able to acquire or facilitate A through Z and all the steps in between that. And it's the same with like festivals. I'm sure you've heard of and maybe even been
Oh,
to Armstrong.
yep,
Like
I know Jesse quite well, and it's that's an undertaking, and that's another thing that you want to do. I think that one of the things that goes along with what you're talking about is being humble and being respectful and being professional. And when you show up to a festival, and yeah, maybe the first time you go there, sure, you might be on early, and you might only be on for 25 minutes, and that doesn't feel great, but in the end, you're there, and it's a foot in the door, and you meet the people, and it's kind of like your first time at something like that. You're really there to impress the people that put on the festival. So hopefully you'll be able to come back and get a better spot and play in front of more people. So it's very important to be humble and to be nice to the people who do the actual real work to put it together. I mean, that is stagehand work and sound guys and all that and lighting guys. That is the real work.
everyone plays a role in putting the show on together. And I think what a lot of bands need to keep in mind too, because it's easy to forget this, because I think as musicians and as performing artists, we can get in our own heads about our own performance and our own sets and what we need. Um, a majority of the time, the people that are there to do their jobs are there to do their jobs to make you look and sound as good as you possibly can. You might have the one off show at a pub where the sound tech doesn't give a damn because he's just a hired hand for like he's helping the bar lady. But a
Yeah.
majority of the time, the people that are at those shows want to be at those shows. They want to help. They want to make you look good because if you look good, everyone has fun. If you sound good, everyone has fun. If everything goes off without a hitch, everyone leaves the show wanting to come back to the next one.
Yep, and that's true. And the other thing to remember is, you are gonna play those crappy bars where, the sound guy doesn't. I mean, I played a show back in the day. I remember playing and thinking, hearing something weird, and I looked and I couldn't understand. I couldn't. It was this weird, like almost grinding sound coming through the monitors, and I couldn't understand what it was. And I looked up, and there was a sound booth, and the sound man is asleep in the sound booth, and his mic was on, and he was snoring, and the snoring was coming from the microphone through the monitors, And in the end, you know what? That sucks, but it's funny, and it makes for a good story, and you just gotta laugh at those moments and take them in stride. Because those are the things when you start to play bigger shows that you tell those are the stories you tell with other bands and stuff, and over a round of drinks or a couple joints at the end of the night or whatever your taste is, right?
100%. And I also find those are the shows where you can learn what you can do as a band to not control everything because you can't. You cannot control everything, but to be able to be problem solvers on the fly, to know what to do in a situation. And there's
Mm-hmm.
one band I want to shout out because I feel like they've really in the past, like past the pandemic, really figured this out. And that's a local band called Raising the Ruins. Over the past summer, they tried using basically a Jimmy rigged in-ear rig with backing tracks and additional guitar for like IEMs and everything. And they ran into issues with every show aside from the one show I worked sound with for them because I talked to them beforehand, figured out their system, just be like, okay, I got this. And then after a weekend stint of just everything going wrong, monitors just not being what they worked from to a point where they're like not even worth putting in. They decided, okay, wait, what can we do? What can we do to fix this situation for ourselves in this situation? And they went and they found their course instead of bitching and complaining about whoever was their tech or whoever did what. They went into problem solving mode to be like, all right, how do we make sure we're good next time?
Sure. And when those things go wrong, you have to just troubleshoot on the fly because you got an audience that paid money and spent their Saturday night, Friday night to be there, and they don't really want to watch you yell at the sound check. I mean, that's not what everyone's there for. So, I mean, unless you're gonna, unless you're gonna cut a WWE style promo on them and make it very entertaining, then maybe that would work. But I've seen that happen, and it is hilarious. But in the end, you gotta persevere. I mean, God, I've played some podunk towns in my life and seen some stuff, and you got to make the best of it. You just really have to.
Hell yeah. I'm just gonna quickly shout out to the audience and be like, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will glance over periodically and I will be sure to shout them out. Um, I was so curious when you said you went from like this thrash metal thing to this stoner metal thing. I'm really curious just because I feel like as musicians, we kind of all go through phases. We have our bread and butter. We have our like the things that brought us to the dance. But
Sure.
we're ever evolving. We're ever inspired by the things around us and we go through our ebbs and our flows and styles. What was that initial transition like going from like that really fast, intense thrash metal mindset to like slowing it down and letting not so much space because it's stoner metal. So I'm sure you guys
Yeah.
had a lot of like sludge in there, but really letting the notes do the work rather than the speed of the track. What was that like for you as a musician shifting?
It was interesting. The approach to the live show had to be different. Because interestingly enough, like you can't make if you make a mistake, it's more glaring because the notes. If you're off a couple notes and you're playing a really difficult run or a quick riff, it's noticeable, but not as noticeable if you play like one fret off when you're like hitting one big chord and it sounds augmented. Like it's really noticeable. So a little more attention to different kinds of details was one thing. But I mean, that band it was kind of what I needed in my life at that time. Like I really, I was a musician that really took myself almost too seriously when I was younger, and playing, I had to play thrash, bro. I had to be fast, and then I kind of started this stoner band as almost a reaction to that, and it was just we were five really good friends who partied and had a lot of fun, smoked a lot of weed, and wrote a lot of wacky stuff, and we would jam from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. sometimes, just having real good times. And I think a lot of people came to see us perform mostly because of the party atmosphere and the fun that we brought, even more so than the music. So it was a good transition for me to remember that this stuff is supposed to be fun, and that was a big thing. But what you said is true. Like we all definitely ebb and flow through different types of music. And it's interesting now that I'm in my 40s. Like I've gone back to the stuff that I grew up on. Like Greyhawk is very traditional metal, like Dio, Priest, Manowar.
I was getting a lot of new wave of British heavy metal when I was
Saxon, all that kind of stuff. That was my bread and butter. That's what I grew up loving. So, to go back to that is just really neat at this point in my life.
That's awesome. So you said 88 Mile. Was it 88 Mile Road? Was that
Trip.
the full name? Or 88 Mile Trip.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said that was a band that you tried like doing across the border once in a while.
After I moved, we did one big tour. We did like a 90-day tour of Canada, and then I basically made the decision that I was going to leave Vancouver. I met my now wife, and I moved across the border to live with her. And we were like, oh yeah, well, Seattle's not that far away, and we figured we could try to make a go of it, but it didn't really work out that well. And other people moved kind of further away as well. They moved out of Vancouver because Vancouver was very expensive. So yeah, I mean, we all remained very tight and very close, even though we don't see each other that much. We all love each other a lot. It just people's living situations changed, which is something that happens in music.
No, 100%. I find that's one of the hardest things when you're in projects with people is knowing that you're in a ever evolving relationship with people that have lives outside of the band.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
those are all going to play factor into how things can work.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that are able to deal with that can and healthily, with mind you, can usually continue on, and those that can healthily realize it doesn't work are able to find what I call as a clean break in a project when there's no hard feelings. Everyone is just at that point in their life where you're like, that was a fun run. Sucks that it has to come to an end, but also I love you all. Wouldn't end it any other way.
Exactly, and for me, I'm just glad it happened. It was a lot of fun, and that's how I met all my friends on Vancouver Island that I know so well, and we played over there all the time, and those are still some of my favorite shows when we go over to Nanaimo and Victoria and tour with Under the Mountain and whoever else, and a lot of cool bands over there.
The
Just
Under the
great,
Mountain
great.
Crew's awesome. They're
Yeah,
solid guys.
those guys and all their friends, and everybody over there is just super solid, and I love going back there. I've taken Greyhawk back there twice, and it's been a great time. So
That's that's really good to hear. What was Skeletor like then when you got into that project?
that was interesting because Skeletor has been around since 1998. Like they've released a ton of albums, and they've been doing this traditional metal thing like all through the 2000s, right? And I moved to Seattle, and I met a dude who was the former bass player, and he was
Okay.
like, "Hey, this band is looking for a bass player. You should try out." And I was like, "All right." So I kind of sent them a message and was like, "Hey, I'm moving to Seattle at this point. If you guys are interested," they said, "Well, we got another guy, but we'll see." And then eventually, I wound up getting an audition. We played 2 songs, and they decided, "Well, let's do this." And yeah, it was. We went on a tour down to from. I joined the band. We cut a demo. We went on a tour from here all the way down to Mexico and all the way back. And we made a full length. And it was interesting for me. It was the first band I wasn't like the guy, kind of driving the whole party forward, not doing the management stuff. So that was
Yeah.
an interesting role. I think I learned a lot in that role, just getting a different perspective on the band. But I really, that was a really good time. We played some amazing shows. We played Frost and Fire, big festival in Ventura in
Oh, that's cool.
2017. So that was the big thing. Playing Mexico was a big thing. Yeah, we opened for a lot of cool bands out here. We got signed to Gates of Hell Records and put out cyber metal. So yeah, it was a good couple years. In the end, I kind of got more interested in Greyhawk because it was more of my baby. And during the pandemic, me and the singer, who's actually still, Jason is still like kind of my roommate, my current living situation. He lives like across the lot, so
Okay.
we kind of hang out all the time and whatever. Still, and I'm still really close with all those guys. So it's we just decided they needed a bass player that was just going to focus on Skeletor, and that's perfectly reasonable. So we agreed that I'd part ways with them, but it was definitely a different experience being in that role.
I was gonna say because you briefly touched on it, but you went from like being, like you said, basically not so much mastermind, but the main driving force in a lot of aspects to
Mm-hmm.
someone filling a role to do a job in a project that had been there long before you had joined.
Yeah.
What was the biggest thing I guess you took away from that? Because that's a huge shift. Not only taking a step back in regards to your role in a project, but taking a step forward in regards to the caliber of project I guess you were in. Because if they have just a bit more longevity, I'd say in that case, like you're going into something that
Yeah.
has a bit of reputation preceding it before you've come in.
Well, I learned how to book a tour. Jason is great at booking tours, so I learned kind of how to do that. He booked that tour he booked for us in 2017 was pretty much perfect. So I learned a lot about that. I also learned a lot about just seeing how band members stepping back from the guy who's always doing the communicating to the person who's being communicated to. I learned a lot about that aspect of things and how it's really important to make sure that all members have the chance to have their say and say their piece. I think if I'm being honest with myself, in the past, in other projects, I kind of steamrolled people and talked over them sometimes because I can have a very powerful personality, and when I get going on an idea or tangent, I get really excited, and I've learned that I kind of got to stop, and before I go too far, go, "Hey guys, like, how are we doing with all this?" And I've learned that through just kind of watching how band members communicate and being in a role that's not like the guy bringing all the ideas to the table, not the ideas, but being the person being like, "Hey, here's what we're gonna do," or "Here's what I think we should do."
Not trying to
So
always be the one providing the solutions and letting other people kind of
Yeah. Let people have a say. Hey, here's what or now like I'll say things in Greyhawk like, hey, I have my opinions about how we should do this, but I'd like to hear what you guys think first, and then it gives them a chance to speak without hearing me speak, so they don't think that either a they're going up against me or I don't exert any kind of influence over what they're going to say.
I think that's something a lot of people, I know myself included, I can definitely relate to that because it seems just to be something that musicians, especially ones that are really passionate about what they do, if they have an idea, we kind of get like zoomed in on that or like so like tunnel vision on what it is
Yeah.
that we think we should do, and it
Mm-hmm.
makes it really easy to kind of unintentionally neglect and disrespect those that are actively there working alongside you. And I think
Sure.
that's a huge thing to keep in mind because I know, like, um, in the past, I can obviously say I've definitely done that one or two times, and not with the intention of trying to be a jackass, but just being like, no, I really think this is how it should go, guys. Like,
Yeah.
I thought about it. So I think that's something
Mm-hmm.
everyone can really keep in mind is being sure to take that step back and know to
Yeah.
maybe let everyone else say their piece first.
Agreed.
Um, where's it going to go from there? So you did everything with Skeletor. You started Greyhawk while you were in Skeletor, based off what
Yeah.
you're saying. Was it
Mm-hmm.
just kind of just a side project that you were dabbling in at the start, or was it always kind of had the intent of becoming the main focus at some point?
Well, it's interesting how it happened because I met Jesse, our guitar player, before I moved to Seattle. You know, when I was moving, I was like, I'm just gonna start putting some feelers out there and see what's going on down there in Seattle. Have a look on Craigslist and whatever. So I was bombing around Craigslist, and there's this guy who's got this ad out for like Racer X, Yngwie Malmsteen, super shredding guitar player, you know, seeks bandmates for classic metal project. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So I'm like, I figured I click on this, figure I'm gonna just like, you know, see some dorky boomer with a crank amp and, you know, just like, you know, I don't know, just like a guy who thinks he can solo. But I was like, man, this guy's good. Like, holy crap, this guy is a special guitarist. So I shot him a message, say, hey man, like I'm coming down here this time. If you don't have a band by then, I'm like, he's gonna have a band by then. But I'm like, if you don't have a band by then, hit me up. Turns out he didn't. Um, and we got together and hung out and hit it off. And then we started trying to find different players, and we didn't have any luck. So I joined Skeletor, and then, well, I should say we didn't have any luck. We had a couple lineups. We broke up with those lineups, and then it kind of petered out. I joined Skeletor. Um, you know, that gets rolling. 2018 rolls around, and I had a barbecue at my house, and I invited Jesse over, and I was like, you know, kind of half corked, and I'm like, hey man, what happened to that? Man, we wrote that demo, we wrote that EP, dude, and that EP rocks. Like, you know, those songs are great. We should make this band. We shouldn't give up, right? Just kind of like, you know, babbling or whatever. And 2 weeks later, he shows up on my doorstep with like half a lineup, and he's like, hey, this is a singer and a guitar player. We just need to find a drummer.
Shit.
And I was like, oh, okay. So we started doing this, and we started writing, you know, the four. We didn't have a drummer yet, so the four of us started writing songs and refining some of our old ideas and making demos. And then there's it was funny. The first time we were trying to get people together, I was like, I don't know if you know where Yakima, Washington is, but Yakima, if you're going distance wise from Vancouver, is like, oh, I don't know, past Hope, like, you
Do you
know,
have to
close it.
if you're going from Vancouver, do you have to pass Yakimo to get to Seattle?
Oh no, Yakima's east. It's like it's 2 hours east, 2.5 hours east of Seattle.
Okay.
So there, I was like, guys, you know, there's this drummer. He was from Yakima, but I didn't give him a chance because I'm like, it's almost 3 hours away. He's not going to make it, but he seemed like a cool guy. You know,
Okay.
I'll hit him up. So I hit him up, and he came out, and he was great. And I was like, so you want to do this? He goes, oh yeah, I've been driving to Seattle for bands for the last like 5 years. Like, it's not a big deal for me. And I was like, he's like, I can't find bands like this in Yakima, so if I want to do it, I got to do it. I was like, okay. So next thing I know, so now this just kind of happens naturally, and now I'm in two bands, which is something I said I'd never do again. Um, and now I'm in two bands, and I'm like, okay. And then so Greyhawk cuts an EP, we start playing, we get picked up by a small label real quick, and you know, get some publicity going, and then it just kind of starts steamrolling from there.
That's okay. Well, damn. So you technically started Greyhawk before you even got into Skeletor, and it just kind of naturally evolved as time went on.
Correct.
That's really cool because at
Mhm.
that point, basically, you've awarded yourself the opportunity to kind of choose how you want to do things for yourself musically. Do you want to do the Greyhawk thing? Do you want to do the Skeletor thing? You're
Yeah.
leaning more Greyhawk. It's more into what you want, and then that leads the Skeletor crew's like, honestly, we want a full time guide, so this works out for everyone.
Yeah,
So
the pandemic was a strange opportunity to do that kind of seamlessly because there were no shows happening. I didn't
yeah,
have I didn't have any commitments, so we kind of decided that was the time. We said okay, but yeah, then Greyhawk gets rolling. We cut our full length. Luckily from talking to people, I learned do not just release your album by yourself. Shop it to labels, get a publicist.
yeah,
Do that. So I just started knocking on every label that I could find in Europe because our sound is very much something that plays more in Europe than North America.
yeah.
Um, so we got this great offer from Fighter Records out of Spain, who are a subdivision of Extreme Music, who used to be Revulsed Records, I think, back in the day.
Okay,
So they're it's a sublet of a pretty large death metal label over in Europe, and they've been great. So ever since then, we've been kind of just we released the album right at the beginning of the pandemic, which was a blessing and a curse because a lot of people heard it because they were home with nothing to do,
yeah,
but we couldn't really follow it up with any support. So it made a lot of noise, and then it kind of didn't.
yeah.
Whereas we definitely could have pushed it a lot harder if we were able to tour. I think we probably would have gotten to Europe a lot earlier than we have. So but it's okay. I mean, you can't cry over spilt milk, right? So it just is what it is.
Yeah, sometimes a blessing and a curse. Like you said, the pandemic has its pros and its cons when it comes to music. It allowed for a lot of people to really figure out what it is they want to do, and it
Yep.
allowed projects to kind of transform themselves into what their next iterations were going to be. But also, then we had the lack of shows, which meant for an indefinite amount of time, it seemed for the longest time, all that work you put in, you never knew exactly how you could capitalize on it or if you could, because like you said, what's the lifespan of as you brought up wrestling earlier, so here's another one. What's the lifespan of a pop if it's not
Mm-hmm.
capitalized on after?
Exactly. For real, right? You have if you have your high spot and there's a great pop with the high spot, where do you take it?
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's just kind of a thing that happened and no one remembers it. So
exactly. And I think it's really cool to like just hear that whole journey because I think there's a lot people can take away from it. I know there's a lot I've taken away from it so far. And now we've gone into the Greyhawk years. And before we get to the headline thing, what was it like for you once you had the ability to go and start doing stuff? Like pandemic starts easing, you're now fully in Greyhawk. You're getting ready to do shows. Like what was that
mm.
like for you? What was the mindset?
um, we were cautious because every time we had a show booked, we were just not sure if it was actually going to happen or not. Right. So I mean, but we were happy because there's a while during the pandemic where we couldn't even practice. Like our rehearsal room was shut down. You couldn't get together. You're not supposed to have gatherings of 5 or more. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
So we couldn't do anything. So we were happy to be back in the room and practicing. And we had a member change during the pandemic. So we were excited. Our first show back was at a heavy metal meadery in Tacoma, which is unfortunately not there anymore. It didn't really make it through the whole pandemic thing. But yeah, it was called Cult Fest. It was called Cult Meet, and they had a thing called Cult Fest, and that was a pretty magical day. It was an outdoor show, so everybody was pretty chill, with the whole COVID regulations and everything, as we figured out that outdoor is pretty cool. But man, people were just rabid for it. They were ready. We sold an obscene amount of merchandise that day. I don't think we've topped that total at the merchandise stand yet. It was wild. A lot of people were coming up and saying, "Hey, we that your album really helped me. Was one of the ones that helped me get through the pandemic. Because Greyhawk's music is kind of all about inner strength and it's very positive. So people were saying how you, and I actually had a podcast that I really want to revive. It was called Keepers of the Flame, and it was me and a buddy of mine who also is the singer in Greyhawk doing really, really in-depth reviews of.
Okay.
But we would do new traditional heavy metal albums, like traditional sounding metal albums that came out in the current year. People were saying that podcast really helped them get through the pandemic too. So it was neat to hear that stuff we were doing creatively really help people out. So that was pretty energizing. So that was our first show back. Second show back was in Boise, Idaho.
Okay, well, we'll get to that one right away then, because I do have a comment question that we'll get to first, because now we got the timeline, everyone. We know where we're at. Sir Integra's asking, what is one of your most memorable moments with a fan at a show?
Memorable moments with a fan at a show. Oh boy. That's a good question. Let me think. I mean, there's good memorable, and there's also not so good memorable. I mean, obviously, the guy who the incident we're going to talk about was not a fan of. He was not even an attendee at the show, so we can't count that. I mean, let's see.
Before we get dark, let's get positive.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. I mean, people are just very, very cool, generally speaking, when you get out there. But I think hearing from one of the guys, I'll say this: one of the guys in Orange Goblin. I don't know if everybody knows that band. They're a stoner rock band. When I was in the 88 Mile Trip, the bass player from Orange Goblin came up and told me he was a fan, and he was like, this song To the Oasis is awesome, and it's got one of the best bass grooves I've ever heard in it. And that was so humbling to hear that from like somebody that I look up to and that I respect so much. I've also had negative interactions with fans where, they come on stage super drunk and dive off into broken glass, which has also happened. So
there's always those few negative incidents that you'll always remember. We had one where a Brit, because we live right about a half hour away from the British military base in Suffield. So every once in a while, the boys come to town, and I was putting on a show. I want to say God Said Kill was the headliner. Can't remember who else I had with them, but the local was Crimson Caliber, and they were playing at the time. And these Brits come in. It's the one guy's birthday, and he just starts heckling at first, being like, "Oi, can I play the drums?" No, man. There's bands playing. It's not an open jam. Well, I'm fucking better than him. Okay, well that's good. Happy birthday. Go enjoy your night with your boys. And then by the end of the night, he's taking swings at someone, and all of God Said Kill and the other band are now like they didn't beat him. They just like swarmed him, restrained him, got him out of the building, and did the whole "don't make us take this any further." And I was like shocked, because we were really lucky with our metal scene where we really don't have those problems, but that was just the first time in a long time, and it was handled so smoothly. So I'm just sitting there being like, wow.
I think I just figured out what my most memorable one was. My favorite moment with a fan. There's a couple guys. I'll shout them out too. Luke Hodges and Mikey Russell. They're a couple guys. They live in Southern Washington area, and they saw us on our second show where we were opening for Grim Reaper, and they travel all over the state. It doesn't matter where we're playing. They show up all over the state. And Mikey, I won't go into the details, but he's had a really tough go with health problems. And this dude will get off of like kidney dialysis to go see a Greyhawk show. Like he's hardcore. So they showed up in Portland, and he told me that he's like, "Oh man, I really would love to get a drum skin someday." So we got a custom bass drum skin made with the Keepers of the Flame album cover on it, and we all signed it. And I called Mikey up to the front of the stage and brought him on stage, and we presented him with this drum kit, this drum head in front of the whole crowd, which was a sold out crowd of like 60, 70 people in Portland, and he got his pop, he got his wrestling pop. The crowd, I guess I kind of told him his story a little bit and whatnot, and
Yeah.
the crowd went nuts, and it was just a special night for him, and it was a special night for me too. So that was probably my favorite moment.
That is wholesome, and that speaks to the type of person you are, and just like the band, and I think the relationship bands should have with their fans. I'm not saying like every band should go and buy every fan like a custom skin, but that give and take. He's a fan that gave a lot of himself to you guys just by
Mm-hmm.
taking his efforts to go there. You guys recognizing that, being humbled by that, and wanting to do something a bit more to give back to him in exchange for that. That's the beauty of what we do. I think as entertainers. I think.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Awesome. Well, now let's get to the nitty gritty. Boise, Idaho. First off, how much of the day do you remember? Because I know that must be quite an event, and I know for some individuals, um, that's not the easiest thing to go back to. But so I'm curious
No,
for you.
I remember most of it. The whole day up to and including getting shot, I remember really vividly. I remember the ambulance ride. I remember the hospital, and I remember leaving the hospital. I don't remember a lot of details about it.
Yeah.
So that's the part where it gets a little bit fuzzy. Like I know cops were talking to me. I know detectives were talking to me, but I don't remember doctors. I don't remember any of the specifics about those conversations. But everything up to and including getting shot is pretty clear
All right.
in my
Well,
brain.
I guess for that, set the scene for us because this I think it's a shocking event for one. Like
Mm-hmm.
it sucks that this happened anywhere. But also, like I said at the very start of this, the way you personally acted, I think, is extremely commendable.
Oh,
And I
thanks.
definitely don't think you woke up that morning thinking that that was how you were going to spend your gig.
My 41st birthday?
Yeah.
No, it
Oh, it's
wasn't.
your birthday too.
It was my 41st birthday.
Well,
So yeah, we were doing we gotten asked by a guy out there to come. Would you come to Boise and do a one-off show? Like I played he had a podcast and he played our music on his podcast and it got some hype with like some of the locals out there and people got pretty hyped and they were like, hey, would you come out and do a show? So we hooked up with a band we really like out here called Command, and we kind of tag teamed a little jaunt just for one gig. Drove to Boise. Boise is a good solid 10 hours from Seattle, so
oh god, yeah.
we all road warried our way out there and played at this place called the Shredder, which is a beautiful venue with really cool people who work there. And so we play the show, and the crowd sings "Me Happy Birthday," and we have a great time, and we rock the house and have a great crowd reaction. We played a great set, and the vibe was wonderful. Like everybody, it felt great. It kind of was like, man, been cooped up for a couple years for this damn pandemic, and I'm like out on the road doing my favorite thing, just touring, meeting new people. I was happy as can be. And the Shredder has like a back patio that's kind of right behind the stage.
Okay.
And outside that patio, there's a little fence line, and then outside that patio is a parking lot. So I was out back hanging out with people, and Doug from Command came up to me and he was like, hey man, there's like some dude out there and he's in the parking lot, he's acting really weird. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he's like, basically we gotta keep an eye on this dude, like, he's kind of being sketchy.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right. So I went out and I kind of looked, and a lot of he wasn't really interacting with anyone when I went out, but I went out and looked, and this guy was definitely out of his mind. He was not in the right place. So he saw me. We kind of like locked eyes for a minute. I think you've never met me, but I'm 6'2", 270 pounds. I'm not a small.
Okay.
I'm a competitive strong man. I'm not a small guy. So
Okay, so we're the same height, so I can definitely get like, because I'm 6'2", roughly 160, 170, so I can definitely see like, okay, that additional mass.
Yeah, so I walked out. He kind of looked at me, and I kind of just looked at him, and he turned around and walked back to his car. So I kind of walked back in the venue, but kind of watching him. And at one point, on his way back to his car, he put up his hand and he did this, like a finger gun motion at the crowd. And at that point, I'm going, uh-oh, this could be trouble. So
Yeah.
he got back in his car, and my first thought was, he's going to do a fucking drive-by, right? So if he started up his car, or his car was, I don't know if it was started or not. He turned the headlights off at some point, but as if he starts driving, I'm just going to yell at everybody to get back inside.
Yeah.
And then, well, unfortunately, he didn't. I was hoping he would just back up and drive away and say, you know what, screw this. But he got back out of his car, and now he's got a backpack on. And I'm like, that's another warning sign. So he came up, and he tried to get in the venue, and another guy, this guy Craig from a band called The Fire Rising, he stepped in the guy's way. He's like, hey, man, you can't come in here. They're basically telling him, like, dude, just chill out. You don't have a ticket. You can't come in here. Like, just please take off.
Private event.
Yeah, well, it was a paid event. Like, you got to pay a cover to get in. And, I mean, at that point, like, all the bands were done. But still, like, the bar's shut. No one's pouring any beers. Like, everything's done. You don't have a ticket. Like, you're methed out of your mind. Like, just turn around and go home. So, at one point, he was asking for a cigarette or something, and some guy went to light his cigarette. At that point, he took a swing at the cigarette and started freaking out. And the dude who was, keeping him out of the bar kind of pushed him back to keep him, just basically to create some space. And this dude starts squaring up with his hands kind of around hip height, and I'm like, oh shit, here we go. So I ran straight out the bar. Because I don't think anybody really realized how serious this was going to get, but I was pretty sure.
You had observed a bunch of things leading up to that, where you were hyper aware of what might come.
Sure, and so I walked up to him, and I saw his hand go towards his pocket. At that point, I don't know if you know much about firearms, but there's a thing in the concealed carry world called printing. So his gun was printing, and that's when the outline of the gun shows through your clothing, and it's actually a violation of concealed carry laws. If you conceal carry, you have to hide the gun completely.
Yeah, can that be considered a threat if you're like...
Correct. So it's like you need to be either open carrying with it on display so everyone can see it, or it needs to be completely concealed. So I saw the printing outline of the gun in his pocket. I saw his hand going for it. So I kicked him. I moved towards him, and I kicked him right on the inside of his leg, the same leg he was like drawing from, that area. It buckled him. I kind of got between him. I kind of got in between him and the crowd, and was kind of advancing towards him to try to push him away from the crowd. And I mean, at this point, I know I'm going to get shot. So he moved to his right. He reached in his pocket. I don't know I think he fucked up his draw and I'm lucky he did, because he shot me. He pulled the trigger, bam, and the gun was still in his pocket when it went off. And
oh shit! So
he shot me, and it hit me in the left leg. I went down to one knee. The interesting thing about getting shot is when you get shot, you kind of free fall to the ground because you temporarily lose like your use of that limb. I went down. I stood back up and yelled something stupid and macho at him. And at that point, a siren went on, and he took off. And my guitar player, Jacqueline, she grabbed me, and she was like, "Stop trying to fight him. You've been shot, you idiot." And I was like, and I said something like, "Yeah, I fucking know that." And so she put me in the back of a minivan or SUV type thing, and she kind of like tied her jacket around my leg like a tourniquet, and tried to give me some remedial first aid. And the cops basically found him hiding with his gun, or his guns, as it turned out. It turned out he had 2 or 3 and about enough ammunition to kill everybody there. So they managed to take him, and the medics took me away for the hospital. I do remember I had to wait, like, because it was COVID times, and another person got shot with more serious injuries that night, really close by. And so they were just kind of leaving. Once they figured out I wasn't dying, they just kind of left me in the room, and I didn't get pain meds for about 4 hours, so I just kind of sitting there, like, on the bed, like, this sucks.
Once the adrenaline eased, that must have really sucked.
Yeah, the funny thing about getting shot is when you first get shot, like, it's not anything I really want to talk about, but it's not the first time I've been shot. So it feels like a bee sting at first, which is really weird. Like it just kind of feels like a pinch and a bee sting. And the pain doesn't kick in until a few hours later when, everything's had a kind of chance to settle and the adrenaline goes away, and then it feels like someone's jamming an ice pick into you every time you move. So,
no, that sounds absolutely horrible. But again, good on you for being observant of the situation once you were made aware of it beforehand. Because from the way you described it, had you not, that could have gone very differently for a lot of people. And
yeah, it
your
could have.
quick actions and quick thinking, um, I mean, no one didn't get hurt, but at least everyone left alive. And getting shot is definitely no easy thing, but it's something you came back from you came back from it rather than just being another lost person to some mad meth head.
Yeah, I got lucky. I mean, that damn bullet is less than a half an inch from my femoral artery in my leg, which if he'd hit my femoral, I would have bled out in seconds. I would have, I would have been dead before I knew it. So
that's what I was going to ask, because I never really took anatomy or biology. That's one thing I didn't really know. But there's one thing I do know just from like basic videos and first aid is that the legs, especially the upper leg, is one of the most dangerous areas to get shot or injured just because of how many arteries there are.
Yeah, I got really lucky. I mean, the stupid bullet's still in me. It's going to be my little passenger forever. But it landed somewhere where it literally. I mean, they say thick thighs save lives. I mean, mine saved my life because I got rather large powerlifting quads, so it's just buried in muscle, and it's They said it landed somewhere, it missed all the nerves, it missed all the arteries, so we're just going to leave it, because if we go in and start digging around, we could do more damage than if we just leave it there.
You sound like a Bond villain.
Yeah.
Description.
So I gotta give a shout out to Craig from the Fire Rising too, because I had great awareness to know the gravity of the situation, but he was aware too. He knew to not let that motherfucker in the bar, and he was aware enough to know that guy was really sketchy, and he just was like, hey, you ain't coming in here. So he played an instrumental role as well, and he's really the unsung hero of this event as well.
You both of you took actions that I think saved a lot of lives that night. And I think that there's no other way to say that other than just that's what it is. You both did very, very commendable things that night, and no one should, I think, ever judge character for you based off that in any way, because that's don't want to say it's a freebie, but it's one of those. Hey, I've literally taken a bullet for a lot of people. I'm not here to hurt anyone.
Yeah, and the good thing is, I mean, if anyone's wondering out there, the trial happened. It took a long time, but the trial happened in August, and
it did finally go.
It did go. So he was found guilty on all charges. He had another trial that I don't know how that went, but he's getting sentenced in December. So hopefully it'll be a lengthy sentence, and he'll have to pay for what he did.
100%. Slight positives, though, out of negatives, because there is a smiley face at the end of this frowny face story. Because, like I said, I had heard about this. I didn't know a whole lot about it, but during the pandemic, whether we were out working or at home, we really couldn't go out a whole lot, especially in Canada. Like, we could go do a few things, but we were still very cautionary in a lot of provinces. So that article had circulated, and then the follow-up to that, which just made me go, oh, fuck, was when they reported that Dave Grohl had decided to lend you his throne for was it just a performance?
It was a couple.
Yeah,
but that was a funny thing, because I went, when the whole thing happened, there was a lot of news coverage, and I was doing quite a few interviews and stuff, and one of the guys who wanted to interview was my buddy Nicky. He played in metal bands, in Vancouver around the same time I was in the 2000s, and he went into radio, and he's the host of a morning show, the morning show in Kamloops, and he was like, "Hey, dude, like, would you come on and kind of talk about the event?" I was like, "Yeah, man, of course. For you, we're old pals. Of course I will." So I went on there, and he's like, "Do you have any shows coming up?" And I was like, so "All these is gonna come full circle." I was like, "Yeah, we're doing some gigs with Unleash the Archers at the end of September." Then he was like, "Well, are you gonna make it?" I was like, "One way or another, I'll probably have to sit down because I can't walk." But and then I literally, as a joke, said, maybe Dave Grohl can lend me that throne that he sat on when he broke his leg in 2015. And that's how it all started. I just made an off-color remark on the radio, and he blasts out to his followers. His followers all start blasting it out. It got to Dee Snider from Twisted Sister.
Oh, dude, that's tight.
So Dee sent it to the Foo Fighters management team. So the Foo Fighters management team messaged me on Twitter, and they're like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I was like, "I don't know. Some people want to like, what's going on with you wanting the throne?" I'm like, "I don't want it. Like, people are fucking trying to say I should get it, but I'm not doing nothing, man." And they're like, "Okay, well, we're gonna call you." So the manager calls me, and he's like, "So what's the deal? Like, what's going on?" And I was like, "Well." At that point, I think I literally told that story like a million times in the past week. So I was like, dude, I was like, dude, I'm not campaigning. I'm not doing anything. People are shouting me out on Twitter and shit. Here's the news article. This is what happened. Do whatever the hell you want with it, right? So I just sent him the news article. About an hour later, their manager calls me back. He's like, "Hey, dude, you're about to get a phone call from Burbank, California. It's not it's not a scammer. You're gonna want to take it." And I'm like, "Well, someone's calling me now." He's like, "Is it this number?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Bye, take the call." So he hangs up, and I take the call. And I remember my wife was sitting next to me because I put it on speaker, and I was like, "Hello?" And he's like, "Is this Darin?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Darin, this is Dave Grohl." And I said, "You know what, Dave? Like, if I didn't just speak to your manager, I swear this was one of my asshole buddies playing a prank on me." And I tell him to fuck off. He's like, "Well, I'm glad you're not telling me to fuck off, dude. Like, what the?" So he's like, "What the fuck, man? I just saw the article." And I was like, he's like, "What happened?" So I told him the story, and he was just flabbergasted. And he's like, "Man, like, I heard about this." And he's like, he was at the MTV Music Video Awards. They were getting some, like, Lifetime Achievement Awards, and he took time out of that day to call me, which was super rad. And he was like, so we talked, and he's like, "So you want to fucking use this thing?" And I was like, "I guess, but I don't know how we work that out." He goes, "Oh, I'm just gonna ship it to your house. Like, don't worry about it. Like, we'll pay for it. Like, we'll just ship it to your house." And I was like, "Really?" He goes, "Dude, you're a Seattle guy. I'm a Seattle guy. Like, we take care of our own. Like, if you we got you." And I was like, he's like, he's like, the manager you talk to, like, all my stagehands, all my guys, they've been around me since like the Nirvana days before we were big. Like they've been around since back then. So they've always been the same. Like, it's always been the same guys, and we love Seattle, and you're part of the team, right? And I was like, wow. So we just chatted for a while. And when you hear he's the nicest guy in rock, it's all true. Like, it's all true. It was like within 5 minutes, it was like talking to my old buddy. We were talking about he made an album called Probot in the 2000s.
Okay.
Which was, I don't know if you ever heard it, but it's a metal album, and he did.
Oh, I forgot about his metal album.
Yeah, so he has like Lemmy and King Diamond and Wino and Eric from Trouble. So we wound up talking. I'm like, "Can I ask you about Probot?" He goes, "Dude, I would love to talk about Probot. No one ever asks me about Probot." So I was like, "What was it like working with Lemmy?" And he was like, he told me for that song, Lemmy wrote 4 sets of lyrics. And he's like, 3 of them were like these super meaningful, introspective, really intelligent songs. And the other one was called Shake Your Blood. So naturally, I picked the one called Shake Your Blood because that's cool. So we talked about that. And then he actually said, like, he said one of the craziest things I've ever heard. He said, he's like, "Well, I'm going to ship this throne to you." And he goes, "I don't know if you know this." So he's like, "I'm going to leave you with this. And I don't know if you know this about me, but one of my best friends in music was Dimebag Darrell from Pantera." And he's like, "People don't know that, but me and Darrell were really close. He was the sweetest guy in music. He was the nicest, funnest guy you could ever meet." And he's like, "I want to thank you for what you did, and I wish that in 2004 in Columbus, you were at that show, and maybe my friend would be alive today." He's like, "And, what you did basically stopped a lot of people from having to feel the pain that I do whenever I think about my friend. And I was like, Dave Grohl just said that to me. Holy shit! Like that's powerful, you know.
That
That kind of like put it all in perspective because I hadn't. When you do something and it's just like for me, it's just with some of my background, that's who I am. That's what I do. It's just I protect people. That's just part of my DNA. So you don't think about the gravity of it sometimes until someone really says something like that and puts you in this perspective, and you're like, God damn, okay, I see.
100%. And there's so much I want to say off that because, like, I joke about it just because growing up, he's always been a huge inspiration for me. But I always joke about how Dave Grohl's my spirit animal because he's always seemed like the most real musician. Even if you didn't dive into like actually wanting to like read up on him, just by how he conveys himself musically and whenever he's around whomever, he just seems like the most real dude. And there's
Yeah.
something me and a lot of friends, I find echoing in the scene, and it's in a positive way. It's the whole real recognizes real. Like, if
Hmm.
you see someone who is genuine and cares about what they do, it's easy to recognize. And that's one of the truest moments of that, to have someone of that caliber. And I don't mean that to like put him on a pedestal, but just knowing what he has achieved as a musician, let alone everything else in his life, to say that to you, that is, um, that's huge, man.
It's
I
cooler
don't know
than
what else to
anything I
say.
ever. It's cooler than anything I ever thought would happen to me. I mean, honestly, like it was. He's such a good guy. He still texts me once in a while. Like if you can believe that. Just like he texted me Merry Christmas last Christmas, and he takes time to like when the Foo Fighters came through town, he took time to make sure that me because I work in the fire protection and construction industry, and they played the first ever show at the new arena in Seattle, and he made sure me and my crew had tickets.
Oh, that's
Like
awesome.
he was just a good guy. And I remember the funniest one was where we played with Unleash the Archers in Seattle was a place called El Corazon, and El Corazon is a medium-sized venue tops, and this throne is designed for stadiums.
Yeah, it's a
And
huge thing
so
by the looks of it.
it's massive. So they already scaled it down for me a bit, but I had to scale it down further. Like I had to get some friends over, and we had to take a whole other layer off, and it was still too big. So and this show was sold out. Like when people like it was already well attended because it's Unleash the Archers, but when
Yeah.
people heard that the throne was coming, it went buck wild and it sold out completely.
It
Right?
becomes a novelty, not to undercut it, but it becomes the novelty experience of that show.
Yeah, you're gonna see this piece of rock and roll history, right?
Yeah.
So my buddies are carrying it in, and the El Corso staff are like, "What's that? You can't bring that in here." And they were like, "Get out of the way! This is why everyone's here. What are you doing?" So we put it on stage, and that venue's a kind of historic venue in Seattle. It's been around since the grunge days,
Oh,
and
okay.
back in the day, it was called the Off Ramp. So I took a picture of it.
Oh.
Yeah. So I took a picture of it and I texted it to Dave. And I was like, "Hey, dude, look, the throne has made its way to the off ramp," and he was laughing so hard. And I'm like, dude, I'm like, my head is like at the ceiling. It's full fucking. I was on the top of it, like taking pictures. So like, my head's touching the ceiling almost, dude. It's full Spinal Tap. It was hilarious.
I
So
mean
he,
this in the most respectful way possible. If 14-year-old me was hearing all of this right now, he'd be so goddamn jealous. Because like grunge is what grunge is one of the things that brought me to the dance. So hearing all
Mhm.
this stuff about like that is just like, oh god
Yeah,
damn, you
it's
lucky guy.
if you ever come down to here, man, let me know because a lot of that history is still here. Like the Central Saloon is still going, and you can see all the pictures of the old bands playing from back in the day. So a lot of those places are still going down here. A lot of those historic venues, which is pretty neat.
Okay, I'm definitely gonna have to get my passport and make just a trip's gonna have to happen. And when it does, I'm definitely
Pilgrimage,
gonna
dude.
dig you
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
Um, That's just amazing. I'm trying to regain my train of thought because there again, like that entire thing blows my mind with just Dave in general. Up, that's one thing I did want to say because with all the positive things we said about Dave, it seems the worst types of things just seem to happen around him, and I really hope he is doing well with his most recent loss because, as he said to you, like I've heard about him and Dime, but like no one can really gauge the closeness of individuals until they actually voice it. And so
Yeah,
that to me, like when Taylor passed, I was like, this fucking sucks because this is someone who's lost two of his best friends in the music
yeah,
industry. And it's more than
yeah.
that. And
Mhm.
he seems like the nicest guy, and it's like stories reflect that. And it just seems like the shittiest shit couldn't happen to the nicest person. And I genuinely
Yeah.
hope he's doing well with everything
If
going on.
there's a guy who can carry that burden and move on, he's the guy to do it. I mean, I wish he didn't have to. It's not fair that he has to. Um, but you know, he's a strong character, and you know, I think he knows that the best way to pay tribute to his friends who he's lost, which you know, rock and roll just takes people, man. It does. It's risky business. It's crazy business, and you know, you don't get into this thinking you're going to have a safe ride. That's just not the way it goes.
No,
So you know, it can follow you, and it's really followed him. But you know, he's the best thing. I think he knows the best thing he can do for them is to keep carrying the torch, and you know, because none of those people would want to see him quit.
so being a light in the darkness, and for one way of phrasing, and another one that I think we can all, I guess, take for ourselves is cherishing those around us while we have
Certainly.
them.
Yeah, man. Like you know, I don't know what losing a bandmate that would be. I don't know, man. That would be fucking wild. I don't know what I'd do. It'd be
It's
really difficult.
because it's family.
Knock
It's
on wood. You know that is his family. Absolutely, it is.
uh,
So
with that transition from the heavier stuff within the positive stuff. Um, what's up with Greyhawk now with everything that's happened? Going into 2023 pretty soon here. What are you guys gearing up to do? What are your plans? What are you excited for?
sure. Well, after the shooting and the throwing incident, we went and recorded an EP, 5 song EP called "Call of the Hawk." It came out. People seem to really like it. I think it's a great EP. So we did that one. We did a music video and released that. That did pretty well. So now then after that, this year we played a couple festivals. We did some touring on the West Coast. We played Legions of Metal Festival in Chicago. We
Oh hell
played
yeah!
we played Stormbringer Metal Festival in Worcester in
Usta.
Massachusetts. Yeah, Worcester. That's how they say it
Okay.
in Massachusetts. So then from there, we kind of took the summer off because honestly, the legal stuff coming, I wasn't really able to focus on anything else.
It's fair.
It was difficult enough with a jury trial coming up because this guy pled not guilty. If you can imagine that. Yeah,
What?
yeah, exactly. So you know, a bunch of us had to go out to Boise and testify in front of people, and it was not a lot of fun. So we kind of took the summer off. We released a beer.
Oh
We
cool.
did we did a beer collaboration called Steelbound Alt Beer. It's a German alt beer. For those fellow beer nerds out there and brewers, so we released that with Hop Capital Brewing out of Yakima, and then we're gearing up now we're starting to get our set list ready for a string of festivals we have next year. We have our first time in Europe. We're playing the Hammer and Iron Festival in Essen, Germany, with
Ooh.
Jagdpanzer, and it's a big festival and it's sold out. And I'm very excited to get in front of a 1,000+ crowd of Germans for the first time. So I'm excited about that. We are playing Hyperspace Festival in Vancouver, BC next year.
Oh, that'll be
Yeah,
fun. They announced the lineup what a month or two ago for that.
I think like just after they did the festival, they kind of announced it. I think they did a video announcement at the festival, most of the lineup.
Okay.
And then we're doing Mad with Power Festival in Wisconsin, with Unleash the Archers and Power Glove and a bunch of cool bands. And we're doing another festival that I can't talk too much about, but people who live in the Lone Star State of Texas should be excited if you like Greyhawk. That's all I'll say.
We'll keep that on the DL, but all you Texans out there, keep an eye out.
Yeah, and and we're a couple songs into writing our next full length. That's the next goal is to we're signed to Fighter Records for one more record, so we're trying to figure out how we're gonna get into the writing of this next one. We're gonna try to approach it with more of a concept and an idea versus just a pile of songs this time. So we're just gonna have to see how that process shakes down. So it should be a busy year for us. Myself personally, I've got another music project on the go that I'm starting that it's top secret. I can't talk about, but it's coming out.
What happened to I don't want to do two projects?
I said that once upon a time, but I am allowed to change my mind.
That's true. Like we said, ebbs and flows, growth and development as a musician and as a person, right?
I mean, my wife always says to me, whenever you get any kind of free time, it just means you're going to start another band. So that's what she always says to me because she knows me very well. So it's always like, whenever you free something up in your life, it just means you're going to start another band of some sort. So I got lots of material written. Collaborating for that one, collaborating with some pretty well-known musicians from other bands. So that should be a fun thing to come out. And then, I'm still always writing lots of stoner doom. So I'd love to find some people to release some heavy stoner rock with at some point. So
I hear that's a genre that once you get in, it never truly leaves you.
It's so fun to play. It really, really is fun and satisfying to play. And you get to buy the biggest gear too. So that's always fun.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, first off, I wish you all the best and all the success on your tours and festivals coming up. I definitely want to have you back on after the European tour cycle because I think that would be quite an experience to talk about. Because as a Canadian, I think you understand, like, playing other countries. It's something that I think very few of us actually get to do because there's a lot of work that goes into that.
There is, and as Canadians, I think we feel a certain sense of isolation being from such like a country where everything is spread out. Everything just feels very far away. One piece of advice that I'd like to chuck out there for any musicians that are listening, people who are starting out, or if you're not, you're just like, hey, I like to listen to what other people have to say. When you get that opportunity, if it's a festival or whatever it is, say yes. Just say yes, and then figure out how to make it happen later. Don't worry about the money. Don't worry about whatever, because you get one chance in this life. You get one chance to be in a band. You're only going to be young for so long. So
there's one band I have to shout out based off that concept because to me they're the epitome of the say yes, figure it out. And they're a thrash band from Mexico called Shadow of Death.
Great band. I love those guys. That's a great band.
Eddie's fucking amazing. And when I was putting together the reiteration of a festival here in Medicine called Alternative Waves, which is basically multi-genre. We just want to give everyone, like the top acts in the underground area at the time, a platform and just show like there is so much happening. And the first time we did that, Eddie and I were kind of talking back and forth because I was doing outreach as an audio engineer. And then he saw the post about submissions and he got my DMs going, hey, so how do we submit to play? And I was just upfront being like, dude, I don't even know if we could afford you. Like, you'd have to get up here. Like, I know we couldn't afford to fly you up here. Like, we could maybe get you backline gear and stuff, but like, it'd be pretty difficult. And he went, no, I'll figure that part out. I'll get us up there. If you can give us a place to stay, just book us and we'll do it. And I instantly went to the band and went, hey guys, I got one of our headliners already. I don't care what any of you are saying. There's a band from Mexico willing to pay to get their asses over here. I'm going to see if I can book him another show in Calgary just to make this worthwhile. So it's not just the one and done.
There you go.
Eddie, like, he is the most humble dude I've ever met. He's thankful for whatever comes his way and he puts in the work. And just based off the whole like say yes mentality, I had to give him a shout out. And I love that you actually are familiar with them too, because I think that's just cool. I like hearing that their name is spreading a little bit.
Giving a band from your area that's very much a product of that mindset too is Striker. I mean,
100%.
God, those guys just they've put everything into it all the time. They are absolutely still to this day one of my absolute favorite bands to see live. Like, I see them every time they come through, and they just the harmonies they sing and the way they've evolved as a band from like a speed metal band into the amazing thing they are now is just pretty incredible, and they're just really nice people too.
Another thrash band from the area, just based off that, would be WMD. They have come so far in the past 6-7 years.
Great
Skylar.
Yeah.
he has come so far. I remember when I was playing with in Nuclear Oath and WMD was I think on their second year, and to me like I see like it's weird because I'm like a core kid as well. So like I look at him and I get like huge bullet for my Valentine vibes just based like he's a pretty face. He's got a baby face. And then his hair's just like naturally straight. So I'm looking at him like you with the axe and the guitar. I get like I know it's thrash metal, but I'm getting this huge like what I'm expecting doesn't match. And then you just see him grow into this frontman persona as the band goes on and really hold his own, which is the hardest thing to do, especially if you're holding an axe while doing everything, because there's a whole nother level of
Yeah.
performance that you have to incorporate. If you're just the front man, oh man, when you're not doing your thing, you can do whatever to hype the crowd up and let the band just kind of do their thing. But if you're like the James Hetfield, Dave Mustaine esque type of figure within your project, that's a whole lot of work. And watching people grow in that
Mhm.
role, I love it. I love it.
They're great. They're great. They spent a week at my house in, I want to say 2019. They were touring with us, and them were touring with Enforcer.
Oh
And
shit.
yeah, they came up the coast. They stayed at my place for like solid 3-4 days in Seattle, and then we all went up to Vancouver and played the show there at the Rickshaw. Yeah, those guys are awesome. Great people.
That's awesome. Oh, so I want to be respectful of your time. First off, I want to thank you for rescheduling this and redoing it with me. That's
No problem.
much appreciated. You're welcome to stick around if you want before, if you do want to leave before you do. Is there a Greyhawk song that you want us to put on for everyone?
Yeah, if you could play "Don't Wait for the Wizard," that one should be readily available. That would be awesome.
I will bring it up here. Then I'll also send my screen your way. Here is from 2020's album. What's Keepers of the
Keepers.
Flame?
Yep, that's right.
Fuck yeah, here, let me do my screen share here with you. Boom. You there. Pull this up. Hey everyone, so this is Greyhawk, Keepers of the Flame. Enjoy. Those tones are just
Thanks, man.
At the gates of the tower that stands between heaven and hell is the enchanted mirror that breaks through illusions and spells. Oh, look inside. What do you see? Could you deny? Would you believe? There stands a figure robed in gold, and he says with a smile, "Don't wait for magic. Don't."
I just want to pause quickly, to tell everyone, yes, you can yay this. I'm probably just going to put it on the poll in the playlist anyway, because you weren't mistaken. Like I've heard a few songs and got a vibe of it, but like, yeah, you guys hit that new wave of like that. Oh no, I don't even want to say new wave, just like everything that I like about that like late 70s, early 80s push of bands and albums. Like the
Oh,
tones, I love like I don't know. They at first they almost gave me like Van Halen esque vibes, just with the way the verb kind of really fills the space with them, but they're also really crunchy. And the
hmm.
vocalist, like solid vocalist. I have to
Yeah,
ask you, bass player, before we get to the vocalist, finger or pick.
it depends on the song.
That's the right answer. I like that.
Depends on the song. But this, yeah, Rev is a bit of a unique vocalist for this style too. He's an trained opera baritone, so he's singing a bit more up in his head or an upper chest voice in this stuff. So he's kind of pushing himself into more of a tenor range and a little bit above sometimes.
I was gonna say because I'm a natural tenor, and I recognize like he was still had a lot of body in those highs, but it sounded also
Yeah.
kind of falsetto-y. So that's cool to know. Like, and I think that's actually a huge thing for all you vocalists out there. If you're watching it, all to keep in mind is despite your range, even if you're a baritone, that doesn't mean you can't hit some of those other notes. You just it's training on that. And I love that you brought up that he's an opera-esque vocalist because I feel like there's a way that they have in their projection. Bruce Dickinson is the best, in my opinion, for this
Mm.
example, but they have a way of reaching that person in the back with their
Yep.
voice. And
Absolutely.
it's beautiful. Let's
I
get
agree.
back to the song. I just wanted to comment on that because I'm really digging this. I had to comment on the tone too because that's just
Go.
mwah.
Wait for truth. Don't wait for the wizard, 'cause the wizard is you. Whoa! In the sun-blasted desert, where rain hasn't fallen for years, is the well of the goddess, with water so blue and so clear. I look inside. What do you see? Could you deny? Would you believe? There stands a figure with a silver crown, and she says with a smile, "Don't wait for magic. Don't wait for truth. Don't wait for the wizard, 'cause the wizard is you. Don't wait for magic. Don't wait for truth. Don't wait for the wizard, 'cause the wizard is you." Whoa! Once you enter the circle, the powers are at your command. Fire and earth and water will rise at the wave of your hand. No! This is true! The power is in you! Oh no! This is true! The power is in you! No!
Dynamics. I love it.
Yeah, I mean that's it's fun to write something.
I want to find someone to pause. There's something else that's like no.
Don't wait for magic. Don't wait for truth. Don't wait for the wizard. For the wizard is
You can do the bombastic noise, the outro.
Dude, that's so like the dynamics and how much you were able to cram in there without them conflicting. Like every time it's like, okay, yeah, no, maybe we'll pause there. Nope, there's something else that's got my ear. Whether it's a nice little saucy lick on the right or a saucy lick on the left, or getting that high intensity down to a nice slower pace and then building it back up to a crescendo. Like
Mhm.
dynamics.
In a lot of ways, it's because it's simple music, right? It's a simple song, so you kind of need to do those kind of things to make it not sound generic. I mean, there's a lot of traditional metal where It's just kind of like the verse, the chorus, and it just happens and it repeats, and there's nothing different at all. It's important to give little twists and turns, even if it's just a little tiny guitar lick or a harmony that comes in, or a little detail, just to subtly make it different so you're telling a story throughout the song.
100%. That's what I loved about it. And again, like it's weird saying it, but like with how the guitars played off each other, I was getting so much like 80s Van Halen out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just because that's like, or at least that like early 80s guitar style of where like it wasn't the vocal point, but it was like the backing melody and it added all the additional little impacts.
Well, Jesse will love to hear that. I'll tell him that we heard some Eddie in his playing, and he'll be very happy.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that I caught on to something maybe a little there.
Oh, you definitely did.
Wanted to ask, do you have to go, or would you like to stick around and check out some tunes?
I got to roll. I got work early. I'm a construction guy, so. But hey, man, I thank you so much for having me on, and thank you everybody who tuned in, and I hope so many people who are listening are digging Greyhawk because we dig you guys.
Hell yeah! Where can they find you?
We got our Bandcamp, greyhawkmetal.bandcamp.com, Greyhawk Official on Facebook, Greyhawk Metal on Instagram. We're up in iTunes and Spotify and all that stuff too, so you can find all our music there.
Hell yeah! Well, I'll make sure also to send links in the chat here shortly. If not Lizzie, myself. Thank you again, Darin, for taking the time for doing this, especially after our issues last weekend. Stay in touch. I definitely want to talk to you more, especially after you guys go and hit Europe.
Yeah, let's talk after Europe, man. Sounds good. Take care.
Take care. Everyone, let's give a round of applause to our guest, Darin Wall of Greyhawk. I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was a whole lot of fun. I enjoyed having him on the show. We still got a lot of